Hey everybody, welcome to a very rainy episode of Everything Kratom, the podcast about anything and everything Kratom. Great to have you with us on this super rainy Monday morning, hoping all is well with you out there today as always. Probably hearing a little bit of pitter-patter on the roof here. If I put this on surround sound, then you'll likely really hear it. So that's what I'm dealing with this morning. It's pretty nice though. That's spring. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about, well, kind of like thinking out loud more like it, about how Kratom came to the US. It seems to be introduced through the Vietnam War and soldiers kind of picking it up over there and bringing it back with them. And how that's happened before in history with other substances as well. And I just wonder, like, what other substances might that happen with down the road? I think the reason why I was thinking a bit about this was because there's a lot of conflict, war, battles, things happening around the world right now, specifically, of course, a lot of media coverage on the Middle East, and, elsewhere too. I mean, there's a whole lot going on, as always, but I think there's a lot more clarity in terms of the sorts of, engagement that's happening now that we have cameras everywhere. And so that's kind of been on my mind a lot. And as I'm watching these conflicts and wars unfold, I'm just kind of thinking, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And we've seen substances come to the US before through war and through engagement. Amphetamines came a lot, at least a large part, during World War II. I mean, the Germans were giving their soldiers methamphetamine tablets, essentially. The British, they started doing that too. And the US, was no exception there either. But then you have the Vietnam War, Kratom comes, also heroin, also marijuana comes a lot. I mean, it's not like this is the first time these substances hit the country, but this was a substantial part of where, their introduction really came to light. And, to the best of my knowledge, as I read through different sources on this, and I've read one or two books on the Vietnam War. So there's a lot that has to do with substances and wars. And thinking through the future of the world and, whatever engagement the U.S. ends up coming to next, because inevitably, I'm sure, the U.S. will get involved militarily in something. I feel like there's always that capacity for a substance to come along with it. And I just wonder which one might be the next in line and what people will do with it and think about it. And also, all of that makes me start to think about what has happened to the substances in the past. Like, how does Kratom, as a substance that was brought to the U.S. through a war, for the most part, it seems, how does Kratom differ in the way that the country treats it as opposed to other things that the country has been introduced to in the similar or same way, but might treat a little bit differently? And I'm not quite sure. Amphetamines have become, a pretty large staple of the pharmaceutical economy, industry, and practice, and the way that people are prescribed medications. I think that ADD, ADHD have been diagnosed a whole heck of a lot recently, and so there's a lot of amphetamines being prescribed. There's a shortage in the country, and so that one's kind of been adopted into the country in that way. And then you have heroin. Heroin has not been adopted into the country in any sort of way, and it's kind of like one of the big bad, dark shadows of this addiction crisis that we find ourselves in. Wow, the rain just died down out of nowhere. That was wild. Well, that's nice. I can hear myself think a little bit. Anyway, so then there's that. There are other substances that have been introduced to the U.S. through wars, and I don't know much about them. But with Kratom, it's like this one is still up in the air, And I'm not thinking of much else that's in that position that was brought over from a war. Not that I have many examples. I mean, there was the Civil War and, like morphine. That was a huge part of the Civil War. Soldiers started using that a lot. Not that that's bringing it from somewhere else, but that's certainly taking something from war and bringing it home and continuing on. But morphine has also been adopted into the way that our country functions medically, for the most part, of course. But it's around, and then there's other things like LSD being experimented with the military, and then kind of like the U.S. giving up on that one. And now there's kind of like a resurgence in the interest in psychedelics again, from a research standpoint. And there's so many ways that a country can experience the introduction of a substance through its soldiers. I find that fascinating. I'm not getting into any of the aspects of it. Negative, of course, mainly, I think, but like not entirely, I guess. But it's a pretty intense subject, and like, why was it that like an estimated 12-15% of soldiers, maybe even 20% of soldiers in Vietnam were using heroin? I mean, why was that? There are reasons, and there's no reason to think that wouldn't happen again with some other substance in a different country or a different engagement, and what that might be. I don't know, but that's just kind of what I'm thinking through today. And how it might be, whatever that substance might be, how it's treated in the U.S. once it kind of takes hold. So there you go. I also wonder if we've brought things over to other countries like that. I mean, I know that we've done that purposefully, but in terms of just like happenstance, I don't know. I mean, we don't really have any countries that have come to the U.S. anytime recently invading and finding, like whatever drug it might be here, and then like using it during battle and then bringing it home. I mean, that hasn't really happened, or at least not since the British. I wonder if they did that. That's something to look into. Anyway, maybe tobacco. Probably something else. So that's kind of what I'm thinking through today. Not really that well informed, but somewhat interested through certain things that I've read, and a little bit of teensy bit of the little bit that I might be informed. So there you go. My thoughts out loud. All right, I'll end it there. Thanks so much for listening. You guys are great. And we will be back tomorrow. And that's about it. All right, everyone. Take it easy. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.